All right, folks, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Noise Signals, Stories, and Spicy Takes, the show where we dig into the stories of the people shaping the future of app based computing with a special focus on mobile. I'm your host, Matt Klein, co founder and CTO of Bitdrift, as well as the founder of Envoy Proxy. Each episode, we'll talk with engineers, founders, and technical leaders who've transformed the way their companies build and understand what's happening inside their systems. We'll dig into the challenges, the breakthroughs, the lessons learned, and we'll wrap it all up with their hottest takes. So let's dive in. Today, I'm thrilled to have with us Ryan Cooke, who is a director at Pinterest, where he manages the Client Foundations org. His teams are responsible for the behind the scenes work necessary for Pinterest Android, iOS, and web apps to be successful. Welcome, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
fantastic. Really excited to dig in and learn. So, where I always love to start is you've had a pretty epic career so far, working at a variety of companies. Would love to just learn about how you got into mobile engineering, what excites you about mobile, and just tell us how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So we'll start with mobile engineering, then kind of do the career path that I followed throughout. So I think so I went to in-state college and was like for my first couple years of CS degree, I was fine. I was enjoying it. But I think something clicked somewhere around like my junior year when I discovered I could actually build like websites and such. So that was, I think, a start of a transformation where I went from just doing the assignments to every weekend, here's a silly, dumb project I did. Um, but honestly, the switch to mobile happened because I did not like doing UI. I
Okay.
This was, before Bootstrap was very popular, and I was not very good at it. It always looked hideous. And I'm like, I made this cool functionality. I scraped this API, whatever, had this thing, but it looks hideous and I can't show it to anyone. And mobile had kind of somewhat of a constrained design system where it gave me a simpler, like I can get something that's presentable, get a pass to it. And maybe this is also spoilers for my career why I end up always doing behind the scenes work on mobile. But
I was gonna say, I mean, like there are a lot of mobile apps that have really bad user interfaces. So, I mean,
you can do it. It's a spectrum. I was
right,
still not
okay,
making I was not winning any awards for my UI on mobile, but it was not the what did this person do distracting as much. So that was in a lot of ways what attracted me to mobile. And then specifically Android, because I was a poor college kid and didn't have a Mac. And for a lot of these, I enjoyed building the project more than it was a vague, like, oh, it'd be cool if somebody would use this and be popular. But it was half for my friends, half for just I liked building the things. So that was what got me building mobile apps in general and kind of focused on that space. Then I guess to go into career, um, from that college of the I like to build things, entrepreneurship seemed like an intuitive route. So I joined a startup in Miami actually I did an accelerator briefly in college, but then I joined a startup in Miami as their first hire. Um, it's not one that's still in business. And there's a bit of a theme of this that I joined as a first hire. I learned a lot. I built a lot of things, but I also, at some point, looking back, realized that perhaps being the first engineering hire when they have a non-technical founder and iffy technical backgrounds, not the best learning ground. So there was a lot built on WordPress, for example, um, which you could build start of an app there, but it went.
and sorry, for your first job, you were doing mobile
I
dev,
was doing.
or you were like doing everything basically
It
because you were
was
the first hire.
they were full stack at the time. I flirted with the hey, we could build a mobile app, but web was the
Right.
first launch. So yeah, I was doing a lot of everything, and I think that mentality really served me well but the actual technical learnings I was able to get from the role were a lot of there were poor practices that I didn't know were poor practices, and
Yeah, sure.
finding that out. But after that, I built a side project app. It got a few thousand users, so I was like, "Oh, maybe this is something." And I left that role, joined the Accelerator, um, which you just don't know. Accelerators are kind of like entrepreneur boot camps. There's a variety of one. Y Combinator's the famous one. I was not at Y Combinator. I was not like at the same league of Y Combinator. It was a small Southeast accelerator, but they help you with the legal pieces. They helped a lot. Um, but again, I think looking back at it, I was a not in a tech ecosystem at all. I was working in the Southeast, and kind of didn't have a like basis for comparison for a lot of things. So I thought, like, I have 5,000 users on this app. I'm going to be big time. 5,000 users is not enough to raise capital unless you're making a lot more money and things like that. So there was a lot of like learnings there. I enjoyed building it. It was good experiences. But in building that app, I eventually, the end of Accelerator, went to San Francisco to, as you do, kind of meet the tech ecosystem. And it'd been interesting because while in the Southeast, I had always heard the like, you don't need to go out west. You know, we have our own hub out here. Um, we have the support and such. But it was so night and day. Like the investors that I was pitching in the Southeast, none of them knew anything about tech. None of them, it's like this guy was a rich wine guy who threw money at random
Right.
projects because he was supposed to. And then going to Southeast or going to San Francisco, it's the like both the Uber driver you had is also building their own startup and has a fascinating story, and just the like people you meet spontaneously are more able to help and give insights and know investors than anybody in the whole ecosystem that I was at.
Was there an app at that time that you were actively pitching, or did you go out just because you thought that it would be a better environment for doing all of these things?
Yeah, so at the time I was like at the end of the rope of an app. I think I had burned through all the accelerator money, and I had not seen kind of an jump and growth from some of the initial user base. So I was floating around an app idea, but I was also at the phase that felt like it was time to transition to something else, and I was leaning towards getting a normal job. So I was in San Francisco. I was pitching um, an app called Track It, which was designed to allow people to log everything they want to do in their daily life and then generate insights of the like. One of the pitches was the like, then you can figure out if you have headaches, that it correlates to days you didn't sleep well or something like
Mm.
that. General tracking tool. I still thought it was fun, but maybe too hard to input. So I was pitching that a little bit. I was going to startups, but I was also just seeing the ecosystem out here and seeing both kind of what I liked in San Francisco was like there's so many people who just believe they can change the world and have this like kind of the you're staying in a I was staying in Airbnbs with four other people in a room, and everybody in that room had the like I'm gonna change the world with my yoga video chat app or whatever it was. And I don't know, that I thought that was really inspiring, combined with a lot of great talent. So I from that decided that if I was going to be in tech, I should be in San Francisco. But I also realized that I felt as though I didn't have a lot of the kind of building blocks to do the entrepreneur and do stuff. Both of the I went to college. I went to self-taught, but all mobile development was self-taught and not have done in a professional
Yeah,
development.
sure.
I'd never seen kind of a successful person raised. So I joined a startup, and that's where I joined Urban Sitter. Um, Urban Sitter, I joined as their first Android engineer. I built the Android app for them. I eventually changed titles to Android tech lead as we hired some more Android folk. And it was a good experience. I had some really great technical mentors there, and I think that really helped me catch a lot of these like flaws in how I was thinking about coding in general. Amusing story of the interviewing there. I had done two interviews that day. I had interviewed with Goodreads and Urban Sitter on the same day, and the interview question they asked was one of those complicated ones where it's on the whiteboard and you see a like circle and a bunch of shapes, and that they were asking the exact same question. So I kind of walked into the Urban Center Urban Center interview room, and they have this like clearly laid out question that's the same one. And
Were
like
you honest?
I was,
Did you tell them that you had like just that day
it
done the
was
same question?
it was a test. It's like I don't know if I got it right earlier, but I was honest and told them to like, I think I know what this question's going to be. Are you going to ask me to like go reverse this or whatever? And they were glad I told them, but then a little bit like, and they did, I thought as a good practice, told me to like outline the solution, because what a big brain move it would be to tell somebody like, oh, I know this question, ask me something different. See a question you don't know at all. So
Right.
I outlined the solution, and then they asked me one on the spot, but I thought that was one of the weirder experiences. Just be like, well, okay.
Maybe they like read the question in a how to interview engineers book
Yeah,
or
it's
something like
one of those,
that.
this is the top results of Google.
Right. That's funny.
Yeah, so we did that. Eventually got the role and had a lot of fun there. But I only ended up staying there a year and a half. I think that was in some ways a mark of my tenure at that point, that I had moved pretty regularly. I hadn't stayed at a role for more than a year and a half. Um, Other reflections kind of up to this point are that my roles had weird amount of leaderships for somebody who, if you're going like the traditional Google leveling, would be like L4 junior engineer. Um, in terms of like I had 2 3 years experience depending on how
Sure.
you count it. And doing the startup, I just did everything myself at both those companies. I made almost all the decisions on my own. Um, so then after that, a friend of mine actually who had left Urban Sitter and joined Pinterest told me that Pinterest is going international and suddenly they care about Android. So I was like, yeah, why not? Give it a try. Um, Interviewed, got the role at then Pinterest was pre-IPO, very well positioned company at the time, a really good time to join it. Um, so the shift made a lot of sense to me. Um, at Pinterest, I was in a very different environment. I had been used to being the person who makes all the Android decisions and owns this, and often spoke even well beyond that scope and had opinions about the business. Urban Sitter, for comparison, had 9 engineers when I left,
Right. Small.
less.
Yeah.
So it was a very small company. Um, in Pinterest, it was still not huge, but I think it was like 30 on Android at the time. Um, so overall, I did well at Pinterest. I've been promoted quite a few times. To go into a little bit more detail on that, first, I think I was probably one of the most annoying junior engineers ever. Where I remember in my first like 6 months or something, I made this huge document of the like, here are things that we need to prioritize as an app. It was the like, now as a director, I don't I don't know what I'd do if I kind of ran into the same engineer who gave me the list. I think I'd be thankful. I think I'd try to direct their energy in the right direction, but it was a lot of things that were very impractical. It's like, we should
Yeah.
have testing. Let's redo all the architecture to do testing. And
I think, I mean, having been a younger, annoying engineer myself, in my experience, people that tend to do well in their careers over time, I don't know. I think there's some shared personality traits, and they tend to be the type of people that you're talking about, I think. And I mean, personally, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because I think sometimes young people that don't know any better, they come in with different perspectives, and sometimes it's good just to get some fresh eyes on things, I think.
I think you're right, and especially if we're giving advice to new folk. I would recommend especially once you get past those junior levels, a lot of the things we're looking for are people who own it, who are actually thinking about like
Sure.
not just doing what they're asked to do, but thinking about what should be done for the app.
Yeah.
I certainly had, 30 years of work on my Google Doc of things we should prioritize. So there was some learnings there. Um, as well as I think something I've also seen, especially now as a manager, finding the right piece to do it, way to do that, I think is one of the skills that you really gain as you grow. And I wouldn't say the Google Doc was the best approach, but it was in the middle. It was a usable, referenceable piece. Um, I've also had engineers on my teams who are super smart engineers, often the smartest person in the room, who in the middle of a meeting will be like, well, you've built this system completely wrong and need to rebuild it. And I like that you're thinking about how we should be building the system. Now is not the time to bring that up. We're trying to solve a bug
Yeah.
or something.
It's also too that, and again, I mean, I'm speaking for myself because I've been guilty of this, especially when I was younger. Is that I think I think it's sometimes it's hard for people to understand all of the constraints that
Mhm.
cause things to be built why they are today. And I think, now that I'm older, I much better appreciate the fact that like a lot of times things are built away because they made sense at the time that they were done. And then maybe they no longer make sense, but it doesn't make it wrong. But I think for a younger person or someone with less experience, it's a lot easier just to say, this is wrong, this is broken.
Definitely. And I think, and it's not bad to say that. I think sometimes, like, especially I've at Pinterest 9 years, I can have the like, this is the way we always do it. And but finding the timing and the place is also a tricky piece that I
For
think
sure.
people skill.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so on the top of the list, and I suppose I should briefly mention that project wise, I was given very vague scope, which I enjoyed. So the first thing I was given at Pinterest was the task make image loading better on Android, which I thought image loading was very important on Android. On Pinterest, we do a lot of images. So from
But
that,
like what was so when you say like make it better, what was bad about it? Or like did they not even say
I wasn't really given a lot of that. So that was,
that?
it was a kind of interim manager at the time who clearly preferred to be an IC, but somebody had to manage the time, and he had just like, here are 5 things that we don't feel are as good as they should be in the
Got
app.
it.
Um, and I asked him, the like, do you want me to put 2 days into this, or 2 months, or should we be building a research team and defining the new way of loading images? Um, Ultimately I was given a like, just do it until you stop getting good results or stop getting good improvements. Um,
But to know that it was bad, I assume you first had to like measure what was going on. So I mean,
yes,
did at the time did they have like enough analytics and other data that you could even know what was happening?
there was not great analytics on it, which is one of the pieces that I focused a lot on. But there was some very basic. You loaded it, you would see a lot of placeholder images,
Got it.
um,
Right.
and the resolution was not great on some of them. Um, and that was kind of how I approached it. Was a very non-analytical take of okay, placeholder images, those seem bad. Let me see if I can prefetch. This one, I can tell the difference if I load a higher resolution image. Let me play around with doing higher resolution. Oh, that got red. Maybe if I pay attention to how the network is,
Hmm.
I can do it. So I did a dozen experiments like that, and kind of a combination of applying best practices and guess and checking. Um, and ultimately, we got a huge improvement, like, and improvements to daily active users, which is something that those experiments I'm still a little suspicious of, because that's not really the type of experiment that should improve daily active users. But a big jump in how much people engaged in impressions, and so we did have the data to show it was getting better at least. And I think that gave me a good bit of credibility of you can put this person on a project, they will solve it. I even gave a conference talk on it, which I was a very awkward person at conference. I spoke at ImageCon, and my background was hey, somebody asked me to make images better, so I ran a dozen experiments, and here's what worked. While everybody
I
else,
Yeah, I mean, the first shocking thing to me is that there's a conference called ImageCon. Like, I did
Mm.
not know that there's an entire conference for images, but it makes sense.
Yeah,
It sounds interesting.
yeah,
Um,
it was a small single track conference, but it was a fun where I'm the person who like I made a billion images load better, and other people are the so here is how we made JPEG 2% more efficient by like diving into this encoding thing. So a very different balance in terms of
yeah, I,
expertise. But
I mean, just for myself, because I'm interested, I don't know, like, could you dig in a little bit on some of the things that you changed? Like, you talked about obviously doing things like prefetching. That one seems fairly obvious to me. But I'm just wondering, like, did you look at different compression schemes, or I don't know. It's like, it seems
yeah,
like there's so many different aspects of things that you could tweak in this area, that are interesting.
yeah, prefetching was the like far and away the biggest win. And if you're not
Yep.
prefetching, that's obvious. Do that for network too while you're at it. I was on performance team for a while, and prefetching is the secret to easy wins. Um, but then resolution, we spent a lot of time kind of finding the right resolution, and there was a combination of often we were fetching images that were larger than could be displayed at all.
Right.
So looking at how big the actual display was going to be combined with how good their network was, we found the balance of the load time matters a little bit more than image
Yeah.
quality. You,
So, like, did you have your own network testing scheme where you would try to determine how effective the network was at that given moment and then dynamically switch, like, what resolution you were fetching effectively?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had one that placed it into kind of little groups and would balance that also based on their phone resolution. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think that any of these are mind blowing. We tried a little bit with different formats, but that became the much more expensive for diminishing returns. So we didn't go too much into like high efficiency or images
Right.
like that.
More more expensive because on the server you would have to like dual encode or re-encode or something along those lines, or
Exactly,
what
and
was the
kind of
expensive
just
portion of it?
a combination of that, and I'd have to pull another team into it,
Got it. Got
and
it. Okay. Yeah.
so kind of just expensive in terms of.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So that was a fun kind of first project that I did at Pinterest. I think that won me some credibility. And then if we get back to that Google Doc I made after the project, the top thing that I put on it was our data is not good enough. I don't trust our data sufficiently. Um, and little did I know at the time, we were preparing to IPO. So I think that caught somebody's eye of the you can't have bad data when you IPO.
When you say data, just so that people understand, I assume you mean like user analytic data, those types of things,
Understanding of
basically.
how users are working
Yep.
on them.
Yep.
So I was put on a like I don't know what you'd call a tiger team, code red kind of group of the. They were given the job of we need our metrics to be accurate enough to IPO, specifically impressions, specifically active users. And that was great. It was a dream team. They pulled just some really good engineers from each platform and such. Um, and from there, I we built a system. I posted a couple blogs on it that we felt would certify a metric and give you confidence that the metric is logging accurate, um, as well as catch issues as they come. And the very short version of that is that first step and the hardest step is defining the metric. We found that every platform had different definitions for what counted as an active user, which seems like a very simple, like the most basic metric that there is.
You would you would think, but it's funny at Bitdrift this comes up pretty often, even from a product perspective, because we have a chart that shows active users, yet it doesn't match necessarily what's in Play Store or other places because there are like you would think it's obvious, but it's not, and you're probably about to tell us. But I was just commenting that this is something that we also face because it's not obvious. Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no, I guess not to get too deep into it, but for what we had been doing at the time was we had been looking at the API. It's like, here's this list of API requests. That they hit those, they're an active user. The problem with that was that every time that number moved, we would assume it was a logging issue. And it normally was. It would be somebody like me. It was like, hey, what if I prefetch this in the background?
Mm.
Or
Right. Yep.
I don't think I caused an issue of mine,
Yep.
but like it was very vulnerable to these kind of dramatic miscountings, and it was very hard to verify was this real activity or was this something that was requested there. So we moved the logic, we made some consistent definitions, and then there was other things where like one platform had a I send this event after they've been active for 10 seconds, while the other one waited for the UI to load. So to find that, we added some layers of tests that just made it so that people it would break. And then we also have data checkers, as we call them. One of our most successful one for active users is unexplained DAO, where it's looks for an active user, and if the active user doesn't have something like impressions, we find that suspicious, and if that moves, we'll look into it. And that finds weird issues. So I think the first level issues are the like, don't shoot yourself in the foot, don't cause a logging issue. But one case that we came up with was we had a Facebook extension. Facebook was decided they didn't want to worry about auth tokens expiring. So they set up a system where it would auto log the Facebook Pinterest extension in the background, like monthly for users. And because of that, it was like actually hitting the UI and refreshing their token. It was triggering active users for us. So we had a spike from active users that was essentially, it was just mobile web, it was loading. And that was kind of a good checker to help us be something's wrong, let's narrow it down and eventually find it. But I'm going into a lot of detail here, and stop me if I'm hitting.
No, I think the detail is really interesting. Keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that group finished, and we IPO'd successfully. We haven't been sued for having metrics wrong. It seems like everything's going great.
I
And
mean, during that time, I mean, I would imagine you learned a lot. Maybe you hadn't had a lot of previous experience, but I mean, you learned a lot about a lot of the mechanics of like having effective telemetry and analytics come from mobile, right? And again, I'm obviously biased from my own experience, but there's so many complexities that I think people don't think about, like all the stuff that you're starting to talk about. So I guess even just stepping back a bit, are there any what are the most high level learnings that you took from that project around best practices that like you would tell other people that are, that are trying to, I guess like have effective telemetry processes, basically.
yeah, I think at a very high level, having some way of documenting what is the actual definition of the metric, and that's something we've been building out here, where it like we have a centralized tool that has the shared definition, and whenever you look at a metric, it goes to the both the English language definition, and then here's the SQL query. So the like
Yep.
here's the official SQL query to get the amount of repins and things like that. And I think that in a lot of ways is the most basic thing that you should do when you talk about metrics, or suddenly you'll have two people at the same company pull the same metric, and they'll be getting different numbers because one of them is spam adjusting, one of them is doing a different way of
Right.
UTC
Yep.
adjustments. And there's just a endless amount of like minutia that you can get wrong. So having that very basic, not even barely technical piece of just like let's align on what we're doing is it. Our other layers are UI testing and those data checkers, but that gets a lot harder. I
Yep.
think beyond that, got check your metrics, and I think as like especially small startups and such are told to be very data driven, um, they need to understand that it's very easy to get a lot of these things wrong. And if something looks fishy on your metrics, especially if you're not doing a lot of things to keep it there, double check it. I think there's a good case when you can move logging to the server do so. For example, the amount of saved pins, instead of logging how many pins that happen on the client from each client separately, looking at the database
Yeah.
and seeing the change is going to be more reliable. And when you have those database records, rely on those. If you don't have time to do these client data things well, relying more on the like database artifacts, the amount of, getting out Pinterest example, amount of bookings you have or something like that, that the user would complain about it if it's wrong. I think that often speaks to the challenges we have. Nobody has ever sent us a bug report that says, on iOS, I opened the app and it counted 2 impressions on this specific cream when I only saw 1. Like,
Yep.
it's very hard to debug that. And we also built some flows to make it easier for developers to see those things when they're testing tooling so they can see the logging live. But stepping back, I think it's also worth noting that these 2 projects, I felt like before going in that you would have a specialist. And there's research papers written about image loadings. There's research papers written about logging accurates. And here I am, college person, never had done this. My experience was, well, I built a couple image apps. They had images loading. It was a lot of learning there. I think this again was where San Francisco was really kind of special. Was that one of the things I did was I'd reach out to the community and I would talk to people who had done this. I'd read blogs, I'd look at best practices. For logging, we worked with Jonathan Maltz, who was at Yelp at the time. They had already IPO'd and were one ahead of the like companies our size in it.
Yep.
And we learned a lot of like what worked from them. And I think
Sure.
spending that time as well on you're often thrown into spots where you don't feel like you're a domain expert and you're asked to be, for 500 million users, I guess we don't have that many on Android, but for a huge user base, be the expert and get it right. And there's some understanding of how do you build up that knowledge quickly and establish sufficient where you think you're going the right direction. And my main tip is, don't feel like you have to figure it out by just going into a meditative state. Like, talk to people and get extra information, and see what's worked. Moving on from that, I was they built a team that we had also built the testing apparatus at Pinterest because we felt testing was really important to keep logging right. So we had became this metric quality and test tools team, and I secretly think I was the 3rd choice to be the tech lead for it. But the other 2 people were burnt out on this space and didn't want to stay on it. So I was kind of the founding member of the tech lead. I defined the strategy, and I was excited for kind of that opportunity. From there, I eventually shifted, I guess, so I became staff level 6 kind of as an engineer. And then I eventually shifted over to a management role of it. I had told, and I think maybe the pro tip here is I had always been transparent to my manager about I'm aiming to get promoted. I want to find it, and I was interested in management. I guess briefly on like interest from management, I think IC to management transition happens a lot. It's a lot of people have different opinions. A lot of people go back and forth. My personal kind of journey to it was that I mostly was more excited about the impact than the technical details, I suppose, especially the complexity. Like, I keep thinking I had a coworker who was really focused on functional programming, and I think they left to build a functional cryptocurrency or something like that. I'm kind of dating. You can subtly guess what year each of these are.
Sure.
But that seemed crazy to me, where I'm like, none of those things have any interest to me. What I liked was I made this 1-line change and it half the amount of out of memory issues we had, and it was nothing super clever, but I like to achieve the thing and see the impact there. And so that's kind of the draw I had to management, was that it was ability to scale and have more kind of pressure and see the impact. It's honestly very weird though, especially the more and more away from the work you get. For a while, I was a line manager and I was able to see I was influencing it quite heavily. But so I was managing metric quality and test tools, and then I don't have like a concise or a like clear story that wives through here, but I think a little bit of the I manage these areas well. People trusted me. A combination of at some point we brought in mobile builds because that was something that was a real pain point. I was the closest team to working on CI. Um, these teams kind of both mobile builds, for example, went from the people are leaving because their builds are taking 15, 30 minutes to this is seems industry peer. It rates pretty well on our developer survey. So having just enough successes there, uh, my scope grew as well as the strategy of just being trusted when people leave. And so my manager left. I inherited, went from one team to three teams. Another manager left. I got their team.
Yep.
And so now I'm managing 8 teams indirectly. I have managers reporting to me.
Yeah.
Um, but it's been a slow growth. And I think the only other piece that really comes to mind to emphasize on that is that what's really, and honestly, I'm still dealing with this challenge, is moving from with those metro quality teams and even mobile builds. I was an expert there. I could be very successful on those teams. I could, I think, arguably be a staff engineer in that space and do a lot. But as the scope has grown, they ask you to own more. And now I own iOS teams. I would not be a staff engineer on the iOS teams. And I think finding the right ways to manage teams beyond your expertise, I think, is kind of the next level of management skills once you go from a line manager to managing groups, is knowing kind of to trust your partners as well as what level you do need to know of each understanding so that you can be informed and help make headcount decisions and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, to some extent, I think the same applies even as you become a higher level IC, right? I mean,
Definitely.
it's like I think that at least when I'm talking to people who are aiming to get promoted or expand their career, I don't know if you agree, but I think that as you move up the levels and you get more managerial domain, or if you move up as an IC to like a principal or a distinguished engineer type of person, I think there's actually a lot of overlap within those roles, right? It's like there's a lot of ambiguity. You're having to lead on the stuff that you might not know a ton about. Um, like from my perspective, I feel like at the highest levels, it's more are you focused on nurturing people or teams, or are you focused purely on the technology? But I think that there are a lot of overlaps. I'm not sure how you feel about that.
I mostly agree. I think with ICs, there's a more variety of routes that you get promoted to. So I think that you do see people get to pretty high levels while still being just super specialists.
Sure.
But a very common route is you need to know outside your domain, and even the specialists are generally asked, make a call on this. I don't need you to be the performance expert. I need you to catch, are there bad practices
Right.
on this that sound wrong? So I 100% agree. And I think that often the roles do start to look similar. We have
Yeah.
calibrations next week, and the most senior ICs in the group are as key, if not more important to the calibrations than the managers. And I know they would rather just be coding, but
Sure.
that's kind of the nature of the role as it grows.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's switch topics slightly. I mean, now that you are managing all of these teams, I'd love to just dig into what are the big challenges that you're facing right now? Not you personally, but like your teams, the mobile engineering org, just from an industry perspective. Like, what excites you? What are your challenges? What are you looking to work on at this point?
Sure. So I think some of our boring is not the right word for it, but I guess classical challenges is that all of our apps were written 10 years ago and we never did the we're throwing this app out and
Right.
starting again. So we have some of those, like one of our big initiatives this year is finally getting to almost entirely Swift. We're not going for 100% quite, but um, getting to kind of the last chunk of milestone of Swift code. And we have a few of those that are just enabling people to use the best technology there. Um, Maybe on the opposite scale of boringness, the new exciting thing is AI's everywhere now,
Yeah.
and we need to figure out like how to use it and where it goes. And I think I've definitely had conflicted feeling, and both AI is, I think, one of those pieces where, as somebody who's always a developer in the weeds, every 3 months I have a little bit of the like, if I'm not doing enough side projects, I don't know if I know how people code anymore, especially if we're looking at like new grads and such. Um, and it's weird to feel more disconnected from the development process than I had been previously.
Yeah.
Um, were you gonna ask something?
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, I mean, I'm just curious if you're willing to talk about how, I guess, like, how are you nurturing your engineers to learn about all of these new tools and like how they can be most effective? Because at least what I found is things are moving so fast. Things are always changing. All these tools are changing, and at least from where I'm sitting, I'm neither an AI skeptic nor do I think that these are like magical gifts from God. It's like I think these are tools that we have to learn how to use, and when used well, they are actually really useful, right?
Mhm.
So like at least where we are now, it's like we have the Slack room where we all just kind of teach each other what we're doing and what's working and not working. And I'm just curious at a larger org, like how do you view that type of rollout? Like how do you make sure that these investments are actually, I don't know, like being useful, I guess.
Yeah, so there's a more centralized team where that's their full mission, but at the same time, I manage a large group of engineers.
Sure.
I want
Yeah.
them to be effective. And I think that honestly, a lot of what you're doing sounds very familiar. We made a virtual team of here are the people who are most leaned into AI, who are the experts, and they both help just like vet and be the like AI champions within the group. There's some Slack channels, I think it's How I AI or something like that, where people share their best practices. Um, we've done kind of pair program showing. I think we're remote, which I think adds an extra layer of challenge where you can't walk past the person and be like,
Right.
wait,
Yeah.
where's your IDE? Why'd you just have a bunch of terminals open? So there's a little bit of like, how do you show kind of some people this, how does this work? This is something that somebody's coding differently. And having sessions, having visibility is mostly what we're doing. I think we're also, as a big org, one of the challenges is that we are very, like, security is very focused on, we can't just give you every tool as soon as it comes out,
Of
even if it
course.
sounds really cool.
Right.
So there's been a balance of how do we kind of, what tools do we recommend, listening to developers to find which ones, as well as at one point, I forget what it was. I think it was just Cursor, but something was in security review process, which we thought would be really good, and we want to start showing how it could work on the code base. So what we ended up doing was having a developer. I don't know if I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. Cut it if I get myself in trouble with lawyers. But we had them work on one of our open source projects on their own device, so that there was like a lot of the risk here is the like, are they going to leak the code? Is
Yeah, of
the
course.
agent going to do
Sure.
something like that?
Yep.
So we
Yep.
had a,
Yeah.
how can we control for that and understand like, will this be able to help solve our problem without doing that
Yeah.
risk and finding
Well, I
these
mean, like,
packages?
yeah, I mean, things are moving so fast. It's like many of these tools now, if you really go to the effort, it's like you can host the models within your own AWS account. So, like, there's ways of mitigating a lot of the risks. But I do agree with you and your security team that, I mean, it's only a matter of time before there's just like an absolutely petrifying security incident, that comes from the use of these tools.
It's gonna happen. I think finding that balance has been a tricky piece,
Yep.
but a lot of, and it's tough too because I think we talk about like how, where you are on the spectrum, and the like virtual group we put together are the people who are closest to the like, AI is changing everything. if you type code anymore, you're an idiot. They don't say that. They're great people, but they're much further on the spectrum, and both helping them like show what they see
Yeah.
and giving the right level of skepticism of what's the balance there has been
Yeah,
interesting.
I mean, I myself, in a matter of 6 months, I mean, I've gone from thinking these tools are mostly a joke to I generate substantial code now with the tools. But, as I said before, to me, they're still tools. Like they will produce garbage if they're not guided well, right? And I think what I've learned is that I think there's considerable skill involved in learning how to use the tools effectively, right? So I just think right now as an industry, we're doing so much experimentation on like what works, but I don't buy the talking heads, that say that they will never have to think about it again. I just don't think that makes any sense.
I'm pretty similar, and I think at least for a good chunk of time, we're going to have the suddenly we can do a whole lot. Suddenly we can get the work that we weren't the most interested in done. And I think as an example, one of our most recent projects, we're migrating from Objective-C to Swift.
Yep.
Very good target for AI.
Absolutely. Yep.
I don't think a lot of people want to put their promotion case on the I move this many files or anything. It's something. And we just recently had a agent that we sent and gave it 10 hours, and it did a migration, landed, shipped. We had estimated it as, I think, 3 weeks of work, and it did it in 10 hours. And
Absolutely. Yep.
I'm both like terrified and impressed. Still in the like everybody read the code this time. I'm not quite far enough to like. I know. I talked to some of our AI fans. They're like, "Oh, we can just have the AI read the code to make sure that it's." I'm like, while we're still getting started, let's test that check. But it's I think it really puts that we are getting into this different world and finding the piece. And I think another interesting example there was we had given the agent to a partner team to ask them to do it, and their initial take was it didn't work. Maybe I could do very small files. And then the person who wrote it tweaked it just a tiny bit, worked on the same file, and was able to, over the course of a day, get the thing migrated and
Yeah.
not even file module.
Yeah.
And I think that's what
Yeah.
you say, that people, I think there's a bias that AI coding and these things is do all the code for me, please.
Mm-mm.
And
Mm-mm. Yep.
there is a skill, and it's a tool that you actually have to learn to use. And unfortunately, you have to learn to use it 3 months from now
Yeah.
differently. And
Yeah. But I mean, obviously using these tools, it's in service of something larger. So you've talked about obviously getting rid of Objective C and trying to move to Swift. That makes sense. Are there any other big initiatives, that from your team perspective that you're working on right now?
there definitely are some. I think test coverage is another
Right.
prime spot for it. And that comes into the we don't want them to write dumb tests, but a lot of training data is dumb tests.
Sure. Right.
But I think testing and Swift migrations are the two biggest ones that we're really leaning into. But there's a lot of smaller kind of migrations as well. That really one of the pieces I've seen is there's these projects that didn't make sense and were not valuable enough to fund because they just would take so much time. Um, One example is how we had internationalization handled on iOS is not the best practice. It works. It maybe causes a bug twice a year, something like that. So it's like not painful enough to be worth a month to fix. Um, but if we can have AI kind of do these same type of changes in a lot of different places that are not too difficult, not to improve, I think it suddenly becomes this project that
Yeah.
just was not worth funding is now on the table and a relatively easy one to get. So I think we're looking at things like that as well. But right now, our biggest focus tends to be the very long running projects that are taking just a large amount of engineering resources, and to like migrations, things like that.
Yeah, sorry. In terms of what I was asking is more around like not just from the AI perspective, but are there any other larger initiatives that you're looking at just from an overall like productivity perspective? Like you have a lot of infrastructure teams, so I assume that there's still build problems or ID
Mm.
problems or whatever, observability problems. So was just wondering more around like what are the things that you're seeing right now
I
within your teams and like where other than AI, I guess, like where do you
got
think
it.
things are going over the next few years?
Yeah, I think thinking of where to start. I think sort of the kind of metric quality group, which where the team formed from in a lot of ways, um, continuing to just there's kind of like both a what does it mean for a metric to be accurate um, debate, I guess that's kind of going on where it's the team can tell you that here basically sorry it's a long-winded way of partnering with teammates and tools to make sure that people are using the correct metric and kind
Yep.
of, hey, we have a short list of here are the super good ones, but how do we elevate all the boats as well as just because we have the here's the way to do it if somebody else queries it differently, how do we approach it? As well as there's a question that we've been having a lot in that group. What do we do about data that is right and wrong at the same time, which is to say, an example is somebody signs up with a birthday and it's today. That's a little suspicious. A lot of people sign up for that. Suspicious amount of people are born in 2000. Um, and just how do we kind of do that and think with our larger decision making? What is the demographic and how can we filter out the like more trusted ones to
Got
understand
it.
those kind of things. So
Yeah.
that's a theme going on in the metric quality space. Um, Going on to the builds, uh, we've been, I guess, so Basil's kind of the
Sure.
hot
Yeah.
topic. Like 5 years ago, I feel like it's still hot, but um, we were actually one of the first to do our builds on iOS and Basil, and we moved back. And I think that we've focused on having a very lean build team. And
Sorry, you use Basil and then you unadopted Basil. Is that
we
what you're
did,
saying?
yes.
I love this story. Okay, keep
It
going.
it's
Yes,
not
please.
as exciting. So I think the reality is that Basil, you need a certain like you generally will get better results, I think, in my opinion, with Basil. Um, but you need more staffing, you need more expertise. And every time a new update, new iOS version is going to come up, you're going to need to do an extra
Right.
layer of work.
Yep.
And what we found was we had not kind of built and staffed out the team to be able to handle that work. And because that, like, our ability to update was overly compromised. So we focused on the like, what can we do really well? How can we leverage the native supported tools? We have each mobile app's in its own repo, so it's able to.
Right.
There's less need of Bazel everywhere. Um, but yeah, so we moved back and we used Gradle and Android and standard toolchain solutions, which we've been generally happy with. Some
Yeah.
kind of like we have twist in a little bit of nuances, but
We build the Bitdrift SDK using Bazel. It is a complicated build because we have a lot of Rust code and a bunch of other stuff going on, but we're constantly asking the question like, should we just have a Gradle build and have an Xcode build and just like be done with this? Anyway,
I think that's where we came up. I bet you'll have faster speeds, but there's just like a lot of maintenance
it
that goes
is.
into
It
it.
is for sure.
And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that's a trade-off you got to make.
Yeah. Well, we're almost up at time. Any last things that you would like to share, either about where you see the mobile industry going, or any other interesting projects that you're looking at right now?
Yeah, I probably should have thought some ahead of time. Nothing jumps out. I think in terms of mobile, there will always be conversations of code once versus code twice or code
Yep.
per platform. And I think that there's more exploration of like these hybrid solution with Rust shivs and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think that that will always be a conversation and continue to have. We're going to keep up with the latest
Yeah.
technologies.
Where do you land, I guess, sorry, one last
Sure.
quick question. Where do you land on the web view versus native code debate, right? And then obviously the intermediate solutions like React Native and Flutter and all of those things. I mostly ask because I feel like there's a lot of circular thinking, right? Around like web views are bad, so we got to go native, right? But then native has a lot of engineering resources, so maybe let's go back to like a React Native or Flutter. But then you have people that are making web faster. I don't know. I mean, I would just love to hear from an expert. How do you think about this?
As a default, I lean towards native. I think that we're a big enough company that like the scale does. I think if I was starting my own startup again from now, I would probably use a Flutter or something like that. I don't actually have to pay for one,
Yep.
but that would be more proof of concept and iterate quickly. I think once you've found your product market fit, right now native still is compelling to me, and it's a lot of the like ecosystem as well that you can better solve crashes. You have
Sure.
less
Yeah.
mysterious issues. um I think where we're discussing and looking at more now is the smaller, can we cut out layers. Metric quality, as I keep going to, is an interesting piece because we need it to be so perfectly similar
Yes.
on
Right. Yep.
all the apps. So kind of how can we, that's very hard to do in native. So we're still kind of exploring more into, can we reduce this overhead? But native's the default where we are,
Yeah.
where I am.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's a good place as any to end it. So thank you, Ryan. That was an awesome conversation. And that's a wrap for this episode of Beyond the Noise, Signal Stories and Spicy Takes. Huge thanks to Ryan for joining and sharing his story. You can find this episode and all past ones on the Bitdrift YouTube channel. If you had fun, drop us a review, tell your friends, or yell your favorite hot take into the void. Just make sure to tag us on Matt Klein, and I will see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.